Day 1 in the escape pod. Sarah and Rebecca floated in darkness. The pod was small, designed for emergencies, not comfort. 2 seats. Emergency rations for 5 days. Oxygen recyclers good for a week. And no engines. The pod rose through sheer buoyancy, slowly ascending through 7 miles of water at a rate of about 2 miles per day. 3.5 days to reach the surface. If everything went right, Rebecca stared at the small porthole window. Nothing but black water outside. Do you think Marcus felt it? When the station exploded? It would have been instant, Sarah said. He wouldn't have felt anything. That's not what I meant. Do you think he felt like it mattered? Like his sacrifice meant something? Sarah thought about the fire creatures rising from the structure, about the ancient things humanity had released. I think he died believing he saved us. That has to count for something. Day 2 in the escape pod. The oxygen recycler started making a grinding noise. Sarah checked the filters. They were clogged. Salt water had gotten into the system somehow. She cleaned them as best she could, but the damage was done. Their oxygen supply, which should have lasted a week, would now last maybe 4 days. They'd make it to the surface. Barely, Rebecca slept most of the day. Sarah couldn't tell if it was exhaustion or depression. Maybe both. They'd lost 4 crew members, 4 friends. And for what? The entity was dead. But something worse had taken its place. Sarah pulled out her tablet. It had survived the ordeal, waterproof and shock-resistant. She opened her research files, the ancient texts, the symbols, and she started translating with renewed purpose. She needed to understand what they'd unleashed. Day 3 in the escape pod. Sarah woke to Rebecca shaking her. Look. Outside. Through the porthole, Sarah could see light. Not sunlight. They were still too deep for that. But bioluminescence. Thousands of deep-sea creatures glowing in the darkness, all moving in the same direction. Up. They're fleeing, Sarah whispered. Something's driving them to the surface. And then she saw what was chasing them. A glow from below, orange and red. Like fire underwater, the fire creatures were rising, and they were moving fast. The pod's depth gauge showed they were at 2 miles. Still so deep, still so far from safety. The glow grew brighter, closer. They're going to catch us, Rebecca said. The pod is too slow. They'll reach us before we surface. Sarah made a decision. The emergency ballast. We can blow it, release all the weight at once. We'll shoot up faster. That could kill us. The pressure change, the bends. Better than burning. Sarah activated the emergency release. The ballast tanks opened, dumping hundreds of pounds of metal. Weights. The pod lurched, then accelerated upward. Sarah and Rebecca were pressed into their seats by the sudden motion. The fire creatures below gave chase, but they were built for the deep. The closer they got to the surface, the slower they moved. The pressure drop was affecting them. But it was affecting Sarah and Rebecca too. Sarah felt her ears pop. Then pop again. Blood vessels in her eyes burst. Her joints ached. The nitrogen in her blood was coming out of solution too fast, forming bubbles in her tissues. The bends, decompression sickness, it could cripple them. Kill them, but they kept rising. 1 mile. Half a mile. And then, impossibly, beautifully, sunlight. The pod breached the surface with explosive force, shooting 10 feet into the air before crashing back down. Sarah gasped, breathing real air for the first time in days. The pod's emergency beacon activated automatically, sending out a distress signal. All they had to do was wait. 6 hours later, a research vessel found them. The crew was shocked, disbelieving. Deep Station Alpha had been declared lost with all hands 3 days ago. Finding survivors was a miracle. Sarah and Rebecca were brought aboard. Given medical treatment, rehydration, pain medication for the decompression sickness, hot food, warm beds. For the first time since the nightmare began, they were safe. But that night, Sarah heard something on He-ship's radio that made her blood run cold. Multiple reports coming in from coastal stations. Temperature anomalies, water heating up in localized areas. Indonesia, Japan, California, all near deep-sea trenches. Sarah grabbed a crew member. What's happening? We don't know. Some kind of volcanic activity maybe, but it's worldwide. Coordinated. We've never seen anything like it. Sarah knew what it was. The fire creatures. They were rising all over the world. From every deep trench, every thin place where the ancient things had been sealed. She found Rebecca in the medical bay. We need to warn them, the government, the military, Everyone. What's coming from the deep? I already tried, Rebecca said. They think we're traumatized, hallucinating from decompression sickness. They're not listening. Then we make them listen. But before Sarah could act, the ship's alarm started blaring. The captain's voice came over the intercom. All hands, emergency status. Something is rising from the water. Multiple contacts. I repeat, multiple. The transmission cut off. Sarah ran to the deck. What she saw made her mind struggle to process. Creatures rising from the ocean. Not ice. Not fire. Something else. Something that looked like water given form and malice. They were massive, 50 feet tall. Humanoid but wrong. Too many limbs. Too many eyes. And they were everywhere. Dozens of them surrounding the ship, rising from water that boiled and steamed around them. The crew panicked. Some ran, some grabbed weapons. None of it mattered. The creatures reached out with appendages made of superheated steam. Everything they touched burned, melted. The ship's hull began to glow red. Sarah grabbed Rebecca. The emergency raft. Now. They ran. Behind them, the ship was dying. Crew members screamed as the creatures boarded. As the heat spread, as metal twisted and plastic melted, Sarah and Rebecca launched the raft and paddled away from the burning ship. They watched it sink, taking the crew down with it. Another group of people dead because of what Deep Station Alpha had unleashed. For 2 days they drifted. No food, no water, just the life jackets keeping them afloat and the raft keeping them together. On the second day, they saw land. A coastline, civilization. But as they got closer, they saw the smoke. Buildings burning, cars abandoned, and in the distance, the creatures, walking on land now, moving inland, setting everything ablaze. It's not just the ocean, Rebecca whispered. They're spreading everywhere. A Coast Guard helicopter found them, pulled them to safety, took them to a military base that had been set up inland, away from the coast. The base commander, General Patricia Hayes, debriefed them immediately. Tell me everything. From the beginning, Ara told her about the structure, the entity, the prison, the fire creatures, everything. When she finished, Hayes was silent for a long moment. We're getting similar reports from all over the world. Deep-sea research stations going dark, creatures emerging from trenches, coastal evacuations. We're calling it the deep breach. And we're losing. How many stations were affected? 17. All of them near major trenches. All of them studying similar structures. And all of them activated something they shouldn't have. Sarah felt sick. 17 stations. 17 prisons. 17 sets of guardians killed. And now, 17 locations where ancient things were rising. What do? We fight. We evacuate coastal regions. We use everything we have, nuclear weapons if necessary. With Dr. Chen, Hayes looked old. Tired. I don't think we can win. These things have been down there for millennia. They're patient. They're coordinated. And they've been planning this. Planning what? To reclaim the surface. To turn our world into what it was before humans existed. Before any land creatures existed. They want to return Earth to a water world. And they have the power to do it. Sarah thought about the ancient texts, about the warnings carved in stone. The ancients sealed them for a reason. There has to be a way to seal them again. If there is, we need to find it. Fast. Because right now, we're evacuating half the world's population, and we have nowhere to put them. 3 months later. Sarah stood in a bunker 200 miles inland. On the screens around her, she could see the progression of the deep breach. The creatures had taken every coastline, turned every ocean into a boiling cauldron. And now they were moving inland, slowly, methodically, following rivers, creating new channels, flooding valleys. Humanity fought back, bombed them, burned them, nuked them. Nothing worked. For every creature killed, 2 more rose from the deep. Rebecca sat beside her, studying the same ancient text Sarah had been translating for months. I found something. Here, this symbol. It's not a warning. It's instructions. Instructions for what? For creating a new seal. The ancients didn't kill these things. They couldn't. But they found a way to trap them. Using sound. Specific frequencies that resonated with the deep. That created barriers the creatures couldn't cross. Can we replicate it? Maybe. If we had enough power, enough speakers, enough range. Sarah pulled up global maps, calculated distances, power requirements. We'd need to place resonators at every major trench. activate them simultaneously, create a worldwide barrier. That's impossible. We don't have the resources. The creatures control the oceans. Then we use what we have. Submarines, deep-sea drones, unmanned vehicles. We don't need people to place the resonators, just equipment. Sarah presented the plan to Hayes. It was insane, suicidal, required resources from every remaining nation, required coordination on a scale humanity had never attempted. But it was their only chance. 6 months later, the resonators were in place. 17 devices, built from ancient specifications. Placed at the exact locations where the structures had been found, where the prisons had been broken. Sarah stood in the command center, her finger over the activation button. This is it. If this doesn't work, we're out of options. Hayes nodded. Do it. Sarah pressed the button. Around the world, 17 resonators activated simultaneously. They emitted sound, not audible to humans, but powerful, resonating through water, through rock, through the deep itself. The creatures stopped, all of them, simultaneously, and they turned, looked at the oceans, and they screamed. The sound was global. Every human on Earth heard it, felt it in their bones. The rage of ancient things being forced back into their prisons. The creatures retreated, pulled back from land, back to the coasts, back into the oceans, fighting the resonance, but unable to resist, and slowly, over hours, they descended, back to the deep, back to the structures, back to the prisons. The resonators increased power, the fighter dance, frequency intensified, and the structures reformed. Stone and ice and ancient power rebuilding the seals. When it was over, the oceans were silent. The creatures were gone. Humanity had survived. Sarah watched the final reports come in. The breach was contained, the seals were holding. For now, how long will it last? Rebecca asked. Sarah looked at the ancient texts, at the symbols that talked about cycles, about the deep dwellers returning again and again, about humanity's eternal struggle against what lived below. The ancients sealed them for 10,000 years. We might get the same, might get less. And then the next generation has to fight, has to learn, has to remember that the deep is not empty. That ancient things sleep there. And that humanity's greatest threat doesn't come from the stars. It comes from below. Sarah nodded. It always has. She looked out the window, at the ocean visible in the distance. Calm now, beautiful. But Sarah knew the truth. Down there, 7 miles deep, in the darkness where no light reached, the creatures were waiting. And one day, they would rise again.